I welcomed my son and his wife to Christmas dinner. I gifted him with a BMW and handed her a designer handbag. Then my son sneered. "Mom, my wife said I should teach you a lesson. No presents for you." My daughter-in-law sat grinning over tea. My humiliation. I slowly drew out an envelope. "Fine. Then I have one more present for you both." The instant he opened it, his hands began trembling. Can you imagine someone telling you, on Christmas Eve, that it's time you learned a lesson about giving? That's what my daughter-in-law, Maureen, told me, moments after I handed her a designer bag and my son, Eddie, the keys to a BMW. But she had no idea I had a lesson of my own cooking, a lesson that would change everything. My name is Ruth Dawson, and if you told me last Christmas that this year I'd be spending the holidays reflecting on betrayal, I would have laughed. But here I am, 73 years young, and surprisingly at peace. Because some lessons cost you everything, but they give you back something far more valuable than any shiny gift. They give you yourself. Now, before I tell you what happened that night, I'm curious, where are you watching this from right now? Are you curled up on the couch, maybe wrapping presents? Or are you like me, spending the holidays quietly, reflecting on the people who broke your trust? Whatever your story, drop a comment below and tell me where you are and what your Christmas plans are. Because I've learned that the people who truly understand you aren't always your own blood. Sometimes, they're strangers on the internet who've survived the same kind of heartbreak. And if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever given everything and received nothing but cruelty, then stay with me. This is the night everything changed. That Christmas Eve, my Florida home smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon candles. My tree, adorned with ornaments Ray, my late husband, and I collected over 40 years, twinkled softly. I'd spent 3 days making everything perfect, scrubbing floors, polishing silver, even making a frantic second trip to the grocery store for Eddie's favorite cranberry sauce. I just wanted it to be special. When they arrived, I hugged Eddie tight. For one fleeting second, I felt like I had my son back. He smelled like Ray's old cologne, his arms felt strong. But then Maureen stepped inside, her eyes immediately scanning my home not with admiration, but with an unsettling assessment. Dinner was quiet, strained. Eddie made small talk about work, but Maureen mostly scrolled through her phone, barely touching the food I'd poured my heart into. I noticed a new, expensive bracelet on her wrist, far beyond what her boutique job should afford. A cold knot formed in my stomach, but I bit my tongue. Mothers learn to swallow questions when they sense the answers might hurt. After dinner, it was time for gifts. I handed Eddie a small box. Inside were the keys to a used BMW I'd been saving for months. Not because he deserved it after how he'd been, but because a mother's love doesn't disappear just because her heart has been bruised. He opened it, his face blank with shock. "Mom," he whispered. "A BMW? You didn't have to." "I wanted to," I said softly. He hugged me then, a real hug, like the boy I remembered before Maureen, before everything. Then I gave Maureen her gift, a designer handbag. She opened it, glanced briefly inside, said a flat, "Cute," and tossed it onto the couch like a rag. No thank you. No appreciation. Just a casual dismissal. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. It was my turn now. And despite everything, despite the growing coldness between us, a tiny part of me still hoped. I still believed that maybe, just maybe, they'd thought of me too. Eddie cleared his throat. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mom," he mumbled, "we didn't get you anything this year." The words hung in the air, heavy, suffocating. I blinked. Did I mishear him? But he kept talking. "Maureen said, she said you need to learn to give without expecting anything back." He even tried to laugh, like humiliating your mother on Christmas Eve was some kind of joke. Maureen, meanwhile, leaned back, arms crossed, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. Not embarrassed. Not apologetic. Satisfied. The room shrank. The tree lights seemed too bright, the warmth I'd worked so hard to create felt utterly hollow. Part of me wanted to crumble, to cry, but I didn't. Because deep, Deep inside, beneath the shock and the hurt, something else stirred. Clarity. I reached into the drawer beside my chair. My hand didn't shake. My voice didn't tremble. Well, I said quietly, looking directly at Morin. If tonight is about lessons, then let me teach you something. I pulled out a large, thick, sealed envelope and placed it on the coffee table between us. Eddie looked confused. Morin's smile faltered, just slightly. Go on, I said. Open it. They had no idea this night was never going to end the way they expected. But to understand that Christmas Eve, you have to go back to when things started changing. Back to September, when I first realized something was terribly wrong. It began with silence. Eddie used to call me 3, sometimes 4 times a week. Nothing deep, just quick check-ins, letting his mom know he was thinking of her. Hey Mom, just calling to say hi. How's the garden? Love you? Small things you don't appreciate until they stop. In September those calls dwindled. A week, then 2, then almost a month passed without a word. I told myself he was busy. Newlyweds building their life. That's natural, healthy. But mothers know. We feel distance the way you feel a coming storm. A shift in the air, a tightening in the chest. One morning, I saw the basket of oranges on my counter. I'd bought them because Eddie always loved fresh squeezed juice. He'd stand beside me as a boy, waiting like it was liquid gold. But now, those oranges sat untouched. And I realized the only reason I still bought them was for a son who no longer came around. I threw them all away that afternoon. The house felt different after Ray died. Bigger. Quieter. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears until you turn on the TV just to hear a human voice. Ray had been gone 2 years. 2 years of empty beds, meals for one, 2 years of walking through a life we'd built together, now walking through it alone. Eddie had been my anchor, calling every day in those first few months. But marriage changed him. Or maybe it was Morin. At first, I tried to be understanding. She was young, adjusting. But the signs were there, small at first, easy to dismiss if you wanted to lie to yourself. Like the time Eddie cancelled Sunday dinner an hour before. Morin has plans, he said, as if her plans automatically became his. Or when I invited them to Janice's and Morin texted me directly. We won't be able to make it. Eddie needs rest. Not. We decided. Not. Sorry. Just a statement, like she had the authority to speak for him. I stared at that text. I wanted to call him, to ask if he even knew. But I didn't. I was afraid of the answer. Mothers are taught to be patient, to trust that love will bring your children back. But they don't tell you that sometimes space becomes distance, and distance becomes abandonment. And, before you know it, you're throwing away oranges for a son who barely remembers you exist. By late September, I hadn't seen Eddie in 6 weeks. I tried texting. Hope works well. Miss you, sweetheart. He'd reply hours later, sometimes the next day. Busy. We'll let you know. Thanks, Mom. Short. Distant. Like I was someone he barely knew. One evening, watching the sunset, I thought about calling him, really calling. But then I imagined my words. Why don't you call me? Did I do something wrong? Do you still love me? It sounded so pathetic. A mother begging her grown son for attention. So I didn't call. I just watched the sky, feeling the weight of loneliness settle deeper into my bones. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A text from Eddie. My heart actually lifted. Maybe he was thinking of me. I opened it. Hey, Mom. Morin and I might stop by this weekend if we have time. She wants to talk to you about something. If we have time. Like I was an errand to check off. And the second part. I set the phone down. Something inside me knew. Not the details, not the full picture, but enough. Enough to know that the son I raised, the boy who used to tell me I was the best mom in the world, was slipping away. And the woman he married was the one holding the door open. They came that Saturday. I spent the morning cleaning, cooking Eddie's favorite roast chicken, trying to make the house smell like home, hoping he'd remember what it felt like to be loved without conditions. When they arrived, Eddie gave me a quick, polite hug. Morin, wearing sunglasses even indoors, scanned my home like a hotel room she wasn't sure about. "Smells good," Eddie offered, trying to be cheerful. Morin walked through the living room, her heels clicking. She paused by the bookshelf, running a finger along the edge, checking for dust. Then, with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, she said casually, "You know, Ruth, this house is really big for one person. It's a lot to maintain. You'd probably be happier somewhere smaller." I stood there, oven mitts still on, pulling the chicken out. "It's the house Ray and I built," I said quietly. "It holds a lot of memories." She shrugged. "Sure, but practically speaking." Eddie stood by the dining table, looking profoundly uncomfortable, avoiding my gaze. He said nothing. I set the roasting pan down. "I like my home," I said, my voice calm. "I'm not ready to leave it." She just gave that same tight smile. "Of course. Just something to think about." But it wasn't a suggestion. It was a statement. A planted seed. Dinner felt like walking on eggshells. Eddie ate with genuine appreciation for a few minutes, looking like my son again. Morin picked at her food, then pulled out her phone, scrolling, uninterested. That's when I noticed it again, the delicate, expensive bracelet on her wrist. And the designer purse on the chair. And her shoes, her perfectly manicured nails. None of it added up to an entry-level boutique job. But what could I say? Accusing felt wrong. So I smiled and kept serving dinner. Later, Eddie helped me carry plates to the kitchen. Just the two of us. "Thanks for dinner, Mom," he said softly. "You're always welcome here," I said, touching his arm. "You know that, right?" He nodded, but wouldn't look at me. "I know." There was something sad in his voice, like he wanted to say more but couldn't. Before I could ask, Morin called from the living room. "Eddie, come here for a second." He tensed, gave me a quick smile, and left. I stood at the sink, rinsing dishes, listening to their muffled voices. I couldn't make out everything, but I heard enough. Morin's voice, low and insistent. "This place could sell for so much. We could finally stop renting. You know, we need this." Eddie said something inaudible. Then Morin, louder. "She doesn't need all this space. She's one person, Eddie. One person. And we are struggling." My hand stopped. The water ran over the plate, but I didn't feel it. "We need this." Not maybe she'd be happier downsizing. Not it might be easier for her. "We need this." They weren't thinking about me. They were thinking about what they could take. I turned off the water, gripping the sink's edge, staring out at the backyard where Ray and I used to sit with coffee, where Eddie learned to ride his bike. Our home. And my son's wife was calculating its value like it was nothing more than a transaction. I dried my hands slowly, took a deep breath, and walked back into the living room, a smile plastered on my face. "Anyone want dessert?" "I made peach cobbler." Morin glanced at her phone. "Actually, we should get going. Early morning tomorrow." Eddie nodded quickly, relieved. They gathered their things. Morin gave me a brief, obligatory hug. Eddie hugged me a little longer, but still distant. "Thanks again, Mom." "Anytime, sweetheart." I stood at the door, watching them go. Morin was on her phone before she even got in the car. Eddie looked back once, just once, and gave a small wave. Then they drove away. I closed the door and leaned against it. The house was quiet again, too quiet. I walked back into the dining room. 3 plates, 3 glasses. Evidence that people had been here, but it felt emptier now than before. I sat in my old chair and stared at the wall. Morin's words replayed, "We need this." And Eddie had said nothing to defend me. Nothing to stop her. That was when I realized something I'd been avoiding for months. My son wasn't the same person anymore. And the woman he married wasn't going to stop until she got what she wanted. 3 weeks passed. No calls, no texts. I tried twice. Both times he replied with the same excuse. "Busy right now, Mom." Maybe next month. Maybe next month. As if his mother was something you penciled in when you had nothing better to do. I stopped trying. Pride has a way of protecting you when love starts to hurt too much. Then, out of nowhere, Eddie called. Hey, Mom. Morin and I are having a cookout this Saturday. Nothing fancy, just burgers. You should come. I was so surprised, I almost dropped the phone. Really? He said, and for a moment he sounded like himself. My heart actually lifted despite everything. Because he was my son. And when your child reaches out, you take it. You hope. I'd love to, I said. Great! Saturday around 2. When I hung up, I stood in the kitchen smiling like a fool. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe things were getting better. Mothers are experts at lying to themselves when the truth is too painful. Saturday came. I made potato salad, bought a bottle of wine, wore a nice blouse. Their apartment was small, a 2-bedroom rental, the kind young couples live in while they save. Eddie greeted me with a genuine smile. Hey, Mom, come on in. Morin was setting paper plates on a folding table. She glanced up. Oh, hey, Ruth. Not warm, not cold, just neutral. Hi, Morin. I brought potato salad. Great. You can put it in the fridge. As I followed Eddie to the kitchen, I noticed a designer shoe box on the counter. Another one. Eddie quickly moved the bag out of sight. We went out to the small balcony. It overlooked the parking lot, but he tried to make it nice with folding chairs and a string of lights. For a little while, it felt normal. Eddie flipped burgers, we talked about his work. He laughed at something I said. It was the most relaxed I'd felt around him in months. Morin stayed inside on her phone, as usual. Then she came out, still scrolling. I'm going to take this call real quick, she said without looking up. Eddie nodded. She walked down to a small patch of grass near the fence. Eddie and I kept talking. He told me about a coworker who reminded him of his dad, the way he organized his desk, the terrible jokes. It was the first time Eddie had mentioned Ray in months. I smiled, my throat tight. Your dad would have liked him. Eddie nodded. Yeah, he would have. Then I heard it. Morin's voice. Low, but the wind carried it. No, he doesn't suspect anything. Just give me time. I froze. Eddie was focused on the grill, oblivious. Morin continued. Once the house sells, everything will fall into place. I just need him to convince her. My stomach dropped. I tried to keep my face neutral, picked up my iced tea, and took a sip, though my hands were shaking. Morin laughed softly into the phone. Trust me, she won't see it coming. Eddie glanced over. She okay? He asked me absently. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Morin said a few more words, then ended the call, slipping her phone into her pocket like nothing had happened. Everything good? Eddie asked her. Yeah, just work stuff, she said smoothly, sitting beside me with that same tight smile. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see my son's wife. I saw someone with a plan. The rest of the cookout was a blur. All I could hear was her voice. Once the house sells, everything will fall into place. Not if, but once. Like it was already decided. When it was time to leave, Eddie walked me to my car. Thanks for coming, Mom. It was really good to see you. I hugged him tight. I love you, sweetheart. Love you too. I drove home in silence, my mind racing. Who was she talking to? He doesn't suspect anything. Was she talking about Eddie? Was there someone else? And the house? My house. She was already planning for it to be sold, dividing up money that wasn't hers, treating my home like a done deal. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for a long time, staring at the front door. The house Ray and I saved for, painted together, where we raised our son. She wanted it, and she was using Eddie to get it. But worse than that, something else was going on. Something Eddie didn't know about. Something she was hiding. I needed the truth. Not guesses. The truth. I pulled out my phone and called Janice. Ruth, everything okay? She asked. No, I said quietly. I need your help. She just said, come over. Right now. I started the car. I was done pretending everything was fine. If my son was being manipulated, if my home was being targeted, if there were secrets, I needed to know. Janice lived 10 minutes away. She'd been my friend since Eddie was in diapers. She was there when Ray proposed, when Eddie was born, when Ray died. If anyone would understand, it was her. She opened the door before I even knocked. I sat on her couch, and she handed me a glass of sweet tea, then waited. I told her everything, the calls that stopped, Morin's comments about my house, the overheard conversation, the expensive things, how Eddie had changed. When I finished, Janice was quiet for a long moment. Then she took my hand. Ruth, she said gently, this isn't something you guess about. You need to know the truth. Not suspicions. The truth. But how? I asked. I can't just accuse her without proof. Eddie would never forgive me. Janice nodded. I know someone. A retired police officer. He does private investigation work now. Quietly. Professionally. If there's something going on, he'll find it. My stomach twisted. Hire someone to follow her? I mean, find out if your instincts are right, Janice said firmly. Because if they are, Eddie is in danger. Not physical danger, but the kind that ruins lives. Financial danger, emotional danger. And you can't protect him if you don't know what you're protecting him from. I stared at my tea. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm just a paranoid old woman? Janice squeezed my hand. Then you'll know that too, and you can let it go. But Ruth, I've known you for 40 years. You're not paranoid. You're careful, and your instincts have never been wrong. She wrote down a number. I stared at it. Hiring an investigator felt like a betrayal. Like admitting that love wasn't enough. But then I thought of Morin's voice. Once the house sells, everything will fall into place. I folded the paper and put it in my purse. Thank you, I said quietly. You're doing the right thing, Janice whispered, hugging me. I drove home, sitting in my driveway for 20 minutes. The next morning, I called Mr. Patel. His office was small, above a tax preparation service. The stairs creaked. The hallway smelled of coffee and old paper. He was older than I expected, maybe 65, with glasses and a kind face. Mrs. Dawson? Janice told me you might call. Please sit. I sat, not knowing where to start. He waited patiently. I think my daughter-in-law is planning something, I finally said. Something that involves my house, and maybe someone else. I don't have proof, just a feeling. And one conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I told him everything. He listened, taking notes. When I finished, he set down his pen. Mrs. Dawson, he said gently, what you're describing sounds like a pattern. Expensive items, pressure to sell your home, private phone calls. These are not random. They suggest intent. So you think I'm right? I think you deserve to know the truth, he said. And I can help you find it. But I need to be honest with you. If I look into this, I may find things you don't want to see. Things about your daughter-in-law. Maybe things about your son. The truth does not always feel good. My throat tightened. I understand. He leaned back. I'll need 2 weeks, maybe less. I'll follow her, document her activities, look into her finances, see who she's meeting with. Then I'll bring you everything I find. He named a price. It was more than I wanted to spend, but less than losing my home. Less than watching my son be used. Okay, I said. I'll be in touch soon. The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I cleaned, I baked, I organized. Every time my phone rang, my heart jumped. But it was never him. Eddie texted once. Hey, Mom. Hope you're doing okay. We'll try to visit soon. We'll try. Not we miss you. I stared at it for a long time. At night, I lay awake, imagining what Patel might find. Part of me hoped he'd find nothing, that Morin was just materialistic, that I was overreacting. But another part of me, the part silenced by doubt for months, knew better. Mothers sense danger around their children like animals sense storms. And I'd been sensing this storm for a long, long time. On the 14th day, my phone rang. A no number. "Mrs. Dawson, this is Mr. Patel." My hand tightened. "Yes? I have what you asked for," he said quietly. "You should come by." My heart sank. "Did you find something?" There was a pause. "Yes," he said. "I think it's better if we talk in person." I closed my eyes. "I'll be there in an hour." I hung up, my hands shaking. For 2 weeks, I told myself I was wrong. But Patel's tone told me everything. He'd found something, and it was bad. I grabbed my purse. The drive to his office felt endless. Every red light, every turn, felt deliberate. When I finally climbed those creaky stairs and knocked, he opened the door immediately. His face was serious. "Come in, Mrs. Dawson." I sat in the same chair. Patel placed a thick manila folder on the desk. He looked at me. "Before I open this," he said gently, "I want you to know that what you're about to see is going to hurt. But you asked for the truth, and you deserve it." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He opened the folder slowly, then said the words I'll never forget. "You should brace yourself." The first thing he pulled out was a photograph. I picked it up with trembling hands. It was Morin, outside a restaurant I didn't recognize, in a dress I'd never seen. Smiling. But she wasn't alone. A tall, well-dressed man stood beside her, his hand resting on the small of her back in a way that was far too familiar. "Who is this?" I whispered. "His name is David Brennan," Patel said. "He owns a commercial real estate firm in Fort Myers." "Real estate?" Patel nodded, sliding another photo across the desk. Morin and the same man getting into a sleek black car, his hand on her waist, her laughing. Another photo, the two of them entering a hotel. My stomach turned. "How long has this been going on?" "At least 4 months," Patel said. "Maybe longer. I followed her on 3 separate occasions. Each time, she met with him. Lunch, dinner, hotels." He paused. "Mrs. Dawson, I need to show you something else." He pulled out a stack of printed pages. Receipts, bank statements, credit card bills. "Morin has been spending money well beyond what her income should allow," he explained. "The boutique where she works pays about $12 an hour, part-time. That's maybe $1,500 a month after taxes." He pointed. "This bracelet she bought 2 weeks ago. $3,000. Paid in cash. This purse? $2,200. Also cash." He spread the papers. "In the last 6 months she has spent close to $30,000 on luxury items. None of it traceable to credit cards in her name. All cash purchases." I stared at the numbers. "Where is she getting the money?" Patel's expression darkened. "That's where it gets worse." He pulled out another document. An email, printed, highlighted. "I was able to access some communication between Morin and Mr. Brennan through a contact I have. This email was sent 3 weeks ago." He handed it to me. I read it slowly, the words blurring. It was from Morin to David. Subject: Timeline update. Eddie is finally coming around. I've been working on him for months about the house. He's starting to see it my way. His mother doesn't need that much space. Once I convince him to talk her into selling, we can move forward. The property is worth at least $600,000, maybe more. Eddie will inherit it eventually, but we don't have time to wait for that. I need him to push her to sell now, while she's still healthy and can be persuaded. Once the sale goes through, Eddie and I will have enough for a decent down payment on our own place. That should keep him happy and distracted for a while. After the divorce is finalized, you and I can move forward without any complications. He still doesn't suspect anything. Just keep being patient. This will all be worth it." I read it 3 times. Each time, the words hit harder. after the divorce is finalized. He still doesn't suspect anything. Once the sale goes through. My hand started shaking so badly I had to set the paper down. She's planning to leave him, I whispered. Patel nodded. Yes. But not until after she gets what she wants. The plan seems to be this: convince Eddie to pressure you into selling your home. Use the proceeds to buy a house together. Then, once everything is settled and the money is secure, she files for divorce. In a marriage that short, with joint property involved, she could walk away with a significant amount. I felt sick. And Eddie has no idea? None, Patel said. From what I can tell, he believes she loves him. He believes they're building a life together. He has no idea she's using him as a stepping stone. I pressed my hand to my mouth. All this time, I thought Morin was just manipulative, just greedy, just a bad influence. But this was so much worse. She wasn't just after my house. She wasn't just pressuring Eddie. She was destroying him, using his trust, his love, using his loyalty to his mother as a weapon to get what she wanted. And when she was done, she was going to leave him with nothing. Patel reached across the desk and placed a steady hand near mine. I know this is hard to hear, he said gently. But you needed to know. Because if you don't stop this, your son is going to lose everything. His marriage, his money, and possibly his relationship with you if he blames you for not selling when she asked. I looked up, tears blurring my vision. What kind of person does this? I whispered. Patel's face was kind but firm. The kind who sees people as tools, not as human beings. He gathered the photos and documents back into the folder. You have options now, Mrs. Dawson. You can show this to Eddie. You can confront Morin. You can protect your assets legally so she never gets what she's after. Or you can do all three. I wiped my eyes and took a deep breath. I need to protect my home first, I said before anything else. If she's planning to manipulate Eddie into making me sell, I need to make sure that's not even possible. Patel nodded. Smart. I know a good family attorney, Rebecca Harris. She specializes in estate planning and asset protection. She can help you set up a trust or other legal protections, make sure your property stays yours no matter what anyone tries. I took the card. Thank you for finding the truth, even though it hurts. Patel walked me to the door. Mrs. Dawson, you are stronger than you think. And you are doing the right thing. Not just for yourself, for your son too. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed him. I walked down those creaky stairs and out into the sunlight. The world looked the same, but everything had changed. I sat in my car, staring at the folder. Inside were photographs of betrayal, proof of lies, evidence of a plan designed to destroy my son's life and steal everything my husband and I had worked for. I thought about Eddie, how he used to look at Morin when they first dated, like she was the most wonderful thing that ever happened to him. The way he defended her, the way he pulled away from me to make her happy. And now I knew why. She'd been whispering in his ear for months, planting seeds of doubt, making him believe his mother was the problem, that my house was an opportunity, not a home. He believed her because he loved her. And she was using that love like a tool. I picked up the folder and held it against my chest. She wasn't just coming for my son. She was coming for everything. But she made one mistake. She underestimated me. She thought I was just a lonely old widow who would do anything to keep her son happy. She thought I'd be easy to manipulate, easy to pressure, easy to break. She was wrong. I started the car. I had work to do. And this time, I wasn't waiting for someone else to protect me. I was going to protect myself. And I was going to protect my son, whether he knew he needed it or not. The next morning, I called attorney Rebecca Harris. Her office was downtown, glass windows, polished floors, very professional. Rebecca was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with sharp eyes and a calm presence. Mrs. Dawson, she said, shaking my hand. Mr. Patel told me you might be calling. Please have a seat. I sat down and placed the folder on the table. I need to protect my home, I said simply. And I need to make sure no one can pressure me into selling it. Not my son, not his wife. No one. Rebecca nodded. Tell me what's going on. I told her everything: Morin's manipulation, the affair, the plan to use Eddie, the emails. Rebecca listened without interrupting. Mrs. Dawson, you have more control than you realize, she said. She explained a living trust. It would allow me to keep complete control of my property while I was alive. No one could force me to sell. And when I eventually passed, the house would transfer according to my wishes. We can also add conditions, she continued. If you want to ensure your son inherits, we can include a clause that protects it from being claimed by a spouse in a divorce. We can also specify that if anyone has attempted to manipulate or pressure you into selling, they are excluded from inheritance. I stared at her. You can do that? Absolutely. It's your property. You get to decide what happens to it. Not your son, not his wife. You. For the first time in months, I felt something I'd almost forgotten: power. Not over other people, but over my own life, my own choices. I want that, I said firmly. All of it. Rebecca smiled. Good. I'll draft the documents. You'll sign them in front of a notary. Once it's done, your home is protected permanently. She paused. But I have to ask, what are you planning to do about your son? Are you going to tell him what you found? I thought about that. Yes, I said quietly. But not yet. Not until I'm ready. Not until he can see the truth with his own eyes. Rebecca nodded slowly. Just be careful. Confrontations like this can go badly. People don't always react the way you hope. I know, I said. But he deserves to know. Even if it destroys him. Because if I don't tell him, she will destroy him anyway. Rebecca reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. You're doing the right thing. For yourself, and for him. 3 days later, I returned to sign the papers. The documents were thick, full of legal language, but Rebecca walked me through every page. When I signed my name, I felt something shift inside me. Strength. The house was mine, fully, legally, irrevocably. Morin could scheme all she wanted. She could whisper in Eddie's ear. She could plan and manipulate and lie. But she would never get my home. I walked out of that office with my head held higher than it had been in months. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with Patel's folder spread out: photographs, receipts, emails, bank statements. Evidence of betrayal. Proof of lies. I studied every detail, memorized the timeline. I read the emails until I could recite them from memory. And then I started planning. I thought about Eddie. The boy who used to hold my hand, the teenager who brought me flowers, the young man who cried at his father's funeral and promised to take care of me. That boy was still in there, buried under Morin's manipulation, blinded by love. I had to believe that. And I was going to bring him back. Not with anger, not with accusations. With truth. I needed him to see what I'd seen, to feel the betrayal I'd felt, to understand that the woman he loved was using him as a tool to steal from his own mother. But I also needed to be smart. If I just showed him the folder, he'd defend her. He'd make excuses. He'd accuse me of being jealous. People reject truth when it's too painful. They protect the lie because it feels safer. So I needed a moment. A moment where he couldn't deny what was right in front of him. A moment where the truth was undeniable. I thought about holidays, about family traditions, about when people let their guard down. And then it came to me, Christmas Eve. I counted the weeks. 2 months. I had 2 months to prepare. 2 months to plan the one night that would change everything. I made a guest list, just Eddie and Morin. A menu, Eddie's favorite foods. Gifts, a BMW for him, a designer handbag for her. Not because she deserved it, but because I needed her to feel safe, comfortable, unsuspecting. I wanted her to think she had won. I wanted her to believe I was just a foolish old woman, desperate for their approval. And then, when she was at her most confident, When she thought the night was going exactly as she planned, I would present the truth. Not with shouting. Not with tears. Just facts, photographs, emails, receipts. Let the evidence speak for itself. I folded the paper, then pulled a large manila envelope from a drawer. Carefully, I placed every piece of evidence inside. I sealed it and wrote Eddie's name on the front. Then I placed it in the drawer of the table beside my favorite chair in the living room. The same chair where I would sit on Christmas Eve. The same chair where I would hand my son the truth. I stared at that envelope. Part of me wanted to call Eddie right then, to warn him. But I knew it wouldn't work. He had to see it himself. He had to feel the weight of betrayal in his own hands. I closed the drawer and stood up. 2 months. I could wait 2 months. I had waited this long already. I walked to the window. The sun was setting. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid. I didn't feel weak. I felt ready. Morin thought she was playing a game. She thought she was 10 steps ahead. But she forgot something. Mothers don't give up on their children. Not when they're in danger. Not when they're being used. Not when they're being destroyed by someone who doesn't truly love them. I turned from the window. Christmas Eve. I whispered to the empty room. The weeks passed slowly. I spent them preparing for everything that would come after. I picked out the BMW, a 3-year-old model, but pristine. It sat in the dealership lot with my name on the paperwork, waiting. I went to the designer store and chose a handbag Morin would love to show off. I paid for both in full. No hesitation. Lucky recipient, the saleswoman said. I just nodded. Lucky was not the word I would use. By early December, I sent the invitation. Not a call, a text. Safer. Hi, sweetheart. I'd love to have you and Morin over for Christmas Eve dinner. It's been too long. Let me know if you can make it. Love, Mom. 3 hours later, Morin replied. Hi, Ruth. That sounds great. We will be there. Also, I've been meaning to talk to you about the house situation. Christmas Eve would be a perfect time to discuss it. See you then. I stared at the message. She couldn't help herself. Even in a simple RSVP, she had to bring up the house. She had an agenda. This wasn't just a family gathering for her, it was an opportunity. I set the phone down. She thought she was walking into a negotiation, a chance to finally convince me to sell. She had no idea what she was really walking into. Eddie texted an hour later. Thanks, Mom. Looking forward to it. Short, polite. Distant. But he was coming. That was all that mattered. The days leading up to Christmas Eve were strange. I cleaned, decorated. Everything looked festive, warm, inviting. But underneath, I was preparing for war. Not the loud kind, but the quiet kind, fought with truth and documents. I rehearsed what I would say, how I'd stay calm, how I'd present the envelope without emotion, without anger, without giving Morin any opportunity to twist the narrative. I would let the facts speak for themselves. 3 days before Christmas, I picked up the BMW. It had a big red bow on the hood. I parked it in my garage, hidden. I wrapped Morin's handbag in expensive paper, making it look like I'd put thought into it. I needed her to believe I was still trying to win her approval. The night before Christmas Eve, I couldn't sleep. What if Eddie didn't believe me? What if he thought I'd fabricated the evidence? What if he chose Morin over the truth? What if he walked out and never spoke to me again? The thoughts circled. But then I thought about the alternative. If I did nothing, Morin would continue manipulating him. She'd take the money, file for divorce, and leave him devastated and broke. And he would never know that I could have stopped it. I couldn't live with that. Whatever happened tomorrow, at least Eddie would know. At least he would have the chance to see who Morin really was. What he did with that information was up to him. But I would not let him walk blindly into destruction. I got out of bed, went to the living room, opened the drawer. The envelope was still there, sealed, heavy. I picked it up, carried it to my bedroom, and set it on the nightstand. Tomorrow, I'd place it by my chair. I climbed back into bed, and for the first time in months, I fell asleep without anxiety twisting in my chest. I wasn't waiting for something terrible to happen anymore. I was ready for it. Christmas Eve morning arrived with clear skies and warm air. I woke early, made coffee, and sat on the back porch. The world felt quiet, peaceful. I thought about Ray. He'd tell me I was doing the right thing. That protecting Eddie meant telling him the truth, even when it hurt. Ray never liked liars. He would have hated Morin. I finished my coffee. Time to work. I spent the morning cooking Eddie's favorites. The house filled with the smell of home. I set the table with the good china, the silver Ray and I received as a wedding gift. Everything looked perfect. I placed the wrapped handbag under the tree, the small box with the car keys beside it. Then I carried the envelope to the living room and placed it in the drawer beside my chair. Out of sight. Waiting. I stood there for a moment. Tonight, everything would change. Either Eddie would see the truth and protect himself, or he would reject it and choose Morin. Either way, I would know. And I would finally stop living in this painful limbo of watching my son be destroyed and being powerless to stop it. I took a deep breath. Then I went to the kitchen. It was almost time. They arrived at 6 sharp. I heard the car pull into the driveway and took a deep breath before opening the door. Eddie stood on the porch, holding a bottle of wine. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey, Mom! Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas, sweetheart!" I hugged him tight. He hugged back, but only for a moment before stepping away. Morin walked up behind him, scrolling on her phone. She glanced up briefly. "Hi, Ruth. Something smells good." "Thank you. Come in." They stepped inside. Eddie looked around. "Wow, Mom, you really went all out." "I wanted it to be special," I said softly. Morin wandered into the living room, her eyes scanning everything. She was doing it again, assessing, calculating. "Would you like something to drink?" I asked Eddie. "Sure, water." We walked to the kitchen. For a brief second, it felt normal. "How have you been, Mom?" "Good. Busy getting ready." He nodded, but his mind seemed elsewhere. "And you? How's work?" "Fine. Busy. You know how it is." He took the glass and drank without looking at me. I wanted to reach out, to tell him everything, but I held back. "Not yet." Morin appeared in the doorway. "Eddie, come look at this." He glanced at me, then walked out. I stood alone, gripping the counter. Dinner was tense. We sat with plates full of food, but the conversation was forced. Eddie talked about work. I asked polite questions. Morin said almost nothing, picking at her turkey, scrolling through her phone between bites, checking her watch twice like she had somewhere better to be. I tried to ignore it, focusing on Eddie, on the way he ate mashed potatoes the same way he had as a child, mixing in too much butter. For a moment, I allowed myself to remember the boy he used to be. That boy was still in there. I had to believe that. After dinner, we moved to the living room. The tree lights blinked softly. My heart hammered. "Should we do gifts?" I asked, keeping my voice light. Eddie nodded. "Sure." I reached under the tree and pulled out the small box. "This is for you, sweetheart." He looked surprised. "Mom, you didn't have to get me anything." "I wanted to." He opened the box slowly. When he saw the keys, his face went blank. Then his eyes widened. "Mom, are these—" "Go look in the garage," I said quietly. He stood, holding the keys like they might disappear. He opened the side door to the garage. I heard his breath catch. "Mom, a BMW!" He turned, his face a mixture of shock and disbelief. "You didn't have to do this." "I know," I said. "But I wanted to. You work hard. You deserve something nice." He walked back into the living room and hugged me. A real hug this time. The kind that reminded me why I was doing all of this. "Thank you," he whispered. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." He pulled back, his eyes glistening slightly. Morin was still on the couch, watching with an unreadable expression. I picked up the second gift, the designer handbag. And this is for you, Morin. She took it without standing, opened it carefully, and lifted the bag. For a second, her eyes lit up. She turned it over, examining the label, then pulled out her phone and took a quick photo of herself holding it. Cute, she said flatly. She set the bag down on the couch beside her like a throw pillow. No thank you? No appreciation. Just a dismissive acknowledgement. Eddie frowned slightly, but said nothing. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. This was it. Eddie cleared his throat. Mom, about your gift. I looked at him. He shifted uncomfortably, wouldn't meet my eyes. We didn't get you anything this year. The words hung in the air. My chest tightened. Oh, I said softly. Eddie tried to laugh it off. Yeah, Morin said, well, she said you need to learn to give without expecting anything back. You know, like, generosity shouldn't come with strings attached. He was trying to make it sound reasonable, philosophical, but the words landed like stones. I looked at Morin. She was leaning back, arms crossed, that small, satisfied smile on her face. Not embarrassed, not apologetic. Proud. Eddie kept talking, his voice growing quieter. It's not personal, Mom. It's just. Morin thinks it's important that we all learn to be less materialistic, especially around the holidays. He gestured vaguely at the gifts I'd given them. You've been so generous, and we appreciate it, we really do. But we thought maybe this year you could just enjoy giving without needing something in return. His voice trailed off. Morin's smile widened, just slightly. She thought she had won. She thought this moment, this humiliation, would break me. Would make me desperate for their approval, willing to do anything to get back into their good graces, including selling my house. I sat very still. The room felt smaller. The lights too bright. The warmth I'd worked so hard to create felt hollow. But I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't react the way she expected. Instead, I felt that same clarity I'd felt months ago. The same strength I'd felt when I signed the legal documents protecting my home. I reached into the drawer beside my chair. My hand didn't shake. I pulled out the envelope, thick, heavy, sealed with the truth inside. I placed it on the coffee table between us. Eddie looked confused. Morin's smile faded just slightly. Well, I said quietly, my voice steady, if tonight is about lessons, then let me teach you something. I looked directly at Morin. Go on, I said. Open it. Eddie glanced at Morin, then at the envelope. Morin leaned forward slowly. Her fingers hesitated for a moment before she picked it up. She unsealed the metal clasp and pulled out the first photograph. The color drained from her face. Eddie leaned closer, frowning. What is that? Morin tried to shove the photo back into the envelope, but Eddie grabbed her wrist. Let me see. He pulled the envelope toward him and dumped the contents onto the table. Photographs scattered across the surface. Receipts, printed emails, bank statements. Eddie picked up one of the photos. His hand started to shake. It was Morin with another man, his hand on her waist, her smiling up at him. Eddie's face went pale. What is this? His voice cracked. He picked up another photo, then another. Then he saw the email. The one where Morin outlined her plan. The timeline, the divorce, the house. He read it slowly, his lips moving as he processed each word. When he finished, he looked up at Morin. Tell me this isn't real. Morin opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Eddie, it's not what it looks like. Your mother is trying to turn you against me. She's jealous. She's always been jealous. Eddie's hands were trembling now. Then explain the photos. Explain the emails. Explain this. He held up a receipt for the bracelet she'd been wearing for weeks. $3,000, Morin. Where did you get $3,000? She stammered, tried to form an excuse, but nothing came out that made sense. Eddie stood up, the papers still clutched in his hands. His face was a mixture of shock, anger, and heartbreak. You were going to leave me, he whispered. After you got the money from my mom's house. You were going to leave me. Morin's face twisted. Your mother was holding us back. She snapped. We needed that house, Eddie. We deserved it. And she was being selfish. The mask slipped. The sweet, loving wife disappeared. What stood in front of us was someone cold, calculating, desperate. Eddie took a step back. Get out. Morin blinked. What? Get out. His voice was low, controlled, but shaking with rage. Eddie, please, just listen. No, he shouted. Get out of my mother's house. Now. Morin stood frozen for a moment. Then, with a burst of fury, she grabbed her purse and the designer handbag I had given her. Fine. You'll regret this, Eddie. You'll regret choosing her over me. She stormed toward the door, her heels clicking sharply. She slammed it so hard the ornaments on the tree rattled. And then she was gone. The silence after Morin left was deafening. Eddie stood in the middle of the living room, still holding the photographs in his trembling hands. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. Then his knees buckled. He collapsed onto the couch, covering his face with his hands. He broke. Shaking sobs came from somewhere I hadn't heard in years. Not since Ray's funeral. Not since the day we buried the man who had raised him to be better than this. I moved slowly and sat beside him. I didn't say anything at first. I just placed my hand gently on his shoulder. He flinched, then leaned into me, burying his face against my shoulder the way he used to when he was small. I'm so sorry, Mom. He choked out between sobs. I'm so sorry. Shh, I whispered. It's okay. It's not okay, he said, pulling back to look at me. His eyes were red, filled with tears and shame. I let her say those things to you. I stood there and watched her treat you like you were nothing. I believed her when she said you were being selfish. I actually believed her. His voice cracked. And tonight, what I said to you about not getting you a gift, about you needing to learn a lesson. He shook his head, unable to finish. Eddie, I said gently, taking his hand. You trusted someone you loved. That's not a flaw. That's being human. But I should have seen it, he said desperately. I should have known. The expensive things. The way she talked about your house. The way she kept pulling me away from you. He wiped his eyes roughly. How could I have been so blind? I squeezed his hand. Because love makes us blind sometimes. It makes us want to believe the best in people, even when the signs are there. And she was very good at what she did. She manipulated you slowly, carefully. You didn't stand a chance. Eddie looked down at the photographs scattered across the table. How long have you known? Since September, I said quietly. I overheard her on the phone at your cookout. Talking about a plan, about the house. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know how deep it went. So I hired someone to find out. He looked at me stunned. You hired an investigator? I nodded. I had to know the truth. Not for me. For you. Because I could see what she was doing. I could see you pulling away, changing. And I knew that if I didn't stop it, she was going to destroy you. Eddie's face crumpled again. I almost let her. He whispered. I almost convinced you to sell this house. She kept saying we needed it, that it was the only way we could move forward, and I was starting to believe her. He looked around the living room, at the tree, at photos of Ray, at the home his parents had built. I almost took this away from you. But you didn't, I said firmly. And that's what matters. He shook his head. Only because you stopped me. If you hadn't found out, if you hadn't shown me tonight. His voice broke. I would have lost everything. The house, you, my self-respect. Everything. I pulled him close again. You haven't lost me, I said softly. You will never lose me. I'm your mother. That doesn't change, no matter what. We sat like that for a long time. The tree lights blinked softly. The house was quiet except for Eddie's breathing. Finally, he pulled back and wiped his eyes. "What do I do now?" he asked. "About Morin? About everything?" I took a deep breath. "You protect yourself. Legally, financially, emotionally. You talk to a lawyer. You make sure she can't take anything from you. And then you start rebuilding your life." Eddie nodded slowly, trying to absorb it all. "And you," he said, looking at me. "The house? Did you do anything to protect it?" I smiled faintly. "I set up a living trust. The house is legally protected. No one can force me to sell it. And when I'm gone, it will go to you, with conditions that protect it from anyone who tried to manipulate me." Eddie let out a shaky breath. "You thought of everything." "I had to," I said simply. "Because I knew you couldn't see what was happening, and I wasn't going to let her take everything your father and I worked for." He hugged me again, tight, desperate. "I love you, Mom. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. I love you too, sweetheart. And you're going to be okay. It's going to hurt for a while, but you're going to be okay." He nodded against my shoulder. We sat there together as the night grew late. The food sat untouched. The gifts remained under the tree. But for the first time in months, I had my son back. Not the version Morin had shaped him into. Not the distant, cold stranger who avoided my calls. The real Eddie. The boy I raised. The man his father would have been proud of. Eventually, Eddie stood up. "I should go," he said quietly. "I need to figure out where I'm staying tonight. I can't go back to the apartment." "You'll stay here," I said firmly. "In your old room, for as long as you need." His eyes filled with tears again. "Thank you." I walked him upstairs. The same room he'd slept in as a teenager. I'd kept it the same all these years. Just in case. "Get some rest," I said. "We'll figure everything out tomorrow." He nodded and closed the door. I walked back downstairs and stood in the living room, looking at the mess on the coffee table. The photographs, the emails, the evidence of betrayal. I gathered it all up slowly and placed it back in the envelope. Then I walked to the fireplace and stared at the flames I'd lit earlier. Part of me wanted to burn it all, to destroy the evidence and pretend none of it had ever happened. But I didn't. Because Eddie might need it for the divorce, for the lawyers, for proof of what she had done. I set the envelope aside and sat down in my chair. The house was quiet now. Peaceful. Christmas Eve hadn't given me joy. It hadn't given me the warm family gathering I had hoped for. But it had given me something more important. Clarity. And my son back. I thought about Morin. About where she was right now. Probably calling David. Probably planning her next move. But she had lost. She hadn't gotten the house. She hadn't gotten the money. And she had lost Eddie. All because she underestimated a mother's love. All because she thought I was weak. I smiled faintly and looked at the tree. The ornaments Ray and I had collected blinked softly. "We did it, Ray," I whispered. "We protected him." I sat there for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. Everything I had learned, that silence is not weakness. That patience is not surrender. That sometimes the people we love need to be protected from their own choices. And that boundaries, even painful ones, are acts of love. I stood up slowly and turned off the tree lights. Then I walked upstairs to bed. Tomorrow, Eddie would wake up in his childhood room. He would have to face the reality of everything he had lost. He would have to grieve, rebuild, start over. But he would not do it alone. And he would do it as himself, not as someone else's tool. As I lay in bed, I thought about all of you watching this, all of you who have felt invisible in your own families. All of you who have given everything and received nothing but cruelty in return. I want you to know something. You are not weak for loving people who hurt you. You are not foolish for giving them chances. But you are also not required to destroy yourself to make them comfortable. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to protect what is yours. You are allowed to walk away from people who use your love as a weapon. Even if those people are your own children. Even if it breaks your heart. Because sometimes the greatest act of love is saying no. Have you ever faced such a profound betrayal from someone you loved, and had to make an impossible choice to protect yourself or your family? Tell me what you think, I really want to know.